Hello everybody on my YouTube channel and anybody else who sees this, BayouGardener.com. Yada. Welcome to my lair. I decided not to go outside today to record a video because this is my think tank room where I come in and I think about world politics and other things, and where I get in touch with my feminine side by watching back episodes of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. Anyway, don't know where that came from, but no, I just wanted to sit down and I wanted to approach, in all seriousness, something that's a very, very controversial topic in the aquaponics and gardening world, and that is, wait for it, whether or not you should use an Intex pool as a pond versus using IBC containers. I know, real deep stuff, right? Anyway, but no, seriously, I think that both systems have their advantages and disadvantages, and I've scoured YouTube and the net, and I have not seen like a step-by-step. I've seen plenty step-by-step stuff for the IBC containers, but not necessarily anything for like using the Intex pools. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, here's an image of one. I know most everybody knows one, but just in case, just for reference. So I sat down in the early morning hours here, and I was thinking about, okay, what are the advantages and disadvantages to both and how they would work? So this is what I've come up with. Number one, when it comes to the advantages of using one of the Intex, plastic pools, the big ones that you can get at Walmart, Target, Toys R Us, wherever. The thing is that they're relatively inexpensive. You can pick one up off of Craigslist for less than $100, and that's for a 10-foot one. You can get a 16-foot one. Like right now, there's a couple of listings on my Craigslist, in my Craigslist, let's try that again, in my Craigslist area for like $250, and those things hold like 6,000 gallons of water. And so therefore, that's the second advantage. It holds massive amounts of water and fish. Also, when it comes to the flexibility of the liner, as you well know, most aquaponic systems, they need a centralized area to siphon out all the fish waste. Well, the flexibility of the liner, from what I've seen, would allow, when you do it, to cave it in just a little bit in the center to where a lot of the fish waste can gravitate towards the center, and then you can siphon it out. Now, what are the disadvantages? Well, yet again, as I just said, as an advantage, one is a disadvantage as well, which is the liner, from what I understand, could easily be cut with fish that have sharp fins, i.e. catfish, which is what I plan on raising. In my case especially, the aesthetics of the pools are not that great. And I live in a city area with a woman who grew up in the city. And these types of pools, when they're used, are usually considered by city folk to be, how may we say kindly, somewhat redneckish. And so therefore it would need to be lowered into the ground. Now, a lot of these pools are 16 foot or 10 foot or whatever, and they're usually about anywhere from 2.5 feet high to 4 feet high. So definitely have to be lowered in by about 2 feet and have 2 feet sticking up. Okay? And the size of these things, especially once you get into the 12 and 16 foot range, that could kind of make it cumbersome. And then also at the same time, you got to build a substructure around it, or at least it helps to build a substructure around the metal frame that's already with it, just to give it a little bit of extra support. So that might be an additional cost. And then also, even though you can hold massive amounts of fish, you're pretty much limited to one type of fish. Now, for me, that's not going to be a problem because I just plan on raising catfish for my own particular reasons. I love catfish. They're big waste producers, and we'll get into that aspect of things here in a few minutes. But those are the three advantages and disadvantages that I find to the Intex pools. Now, then we have the big IBC boxes. What are the advantages of this? They are very, very rugged. Very, very rugged. They have the hard plastic, the food grade plastic, and then they have the cage that comes around that. And so that makes it a very, very structurally sound item to use for fish tanks and grow gardens and all that good stuff, which brings me to point number 2. You can make a grow bed and a fish tank out of one container, which is good for some people, especially you live in a small area, have a small backyard, or what have you. And you're not limited to one type of fish if you have multiple tanks. So you could put catfish in one, tilapia in another, koi in another, or what have you, bass, trout, all the live long day. You're not limited. And then you still have the same water supply that you could feed to your grow beds. Now, the disadvantages to the IBC tanks is that in relative comparison, when you're looking at dollar per gallon or whatever else, versus the pools, these things are expensive. The IBC tanks are expensive. In my area, San Antonio, they're $135 a piece for a 275 gallon IBC tote. Now, I'm not made out of money, and I don't know how some of you find these things just laying around. But I'm going off of things that I would actually have to buy. So then the other thing is, if you have multiple tanks, it may require a little bit more plumbing than what it would require if you have one big primary water source. Okay, so if you have, let's say, 4 IBC tanks, that's 275 gallons. Let's just do the math. I think that's like 1,100 gallons or something like that. Right at 1,000 gallons. I don't know. I'm not good at doing math in my head, but I think it's like 1,100 to 1,200 gallons. You would have to, do the plumbing and all that good stuff. And also then another one is that if they're not food grade IBCs, you got to make sure that you bleach those things out pretty well to make sure that none of the residual chemicals that may have been in there leach into the water. Now, this is kind of a minor problem because we know how to clean things, but that's just one minor thing. So these are advantages and disadvantages to both of these types of systems. I think both of them are viable systems for a good aquaponic greenhouse system. Now, what is my decision going to be? What am I going to use? Drum roll, please. I am actually going to use a combination of both an Intex pool system and IBC totes. Now, how am I going to do this? Well, that's kind of a work in process. But what I think is going to happen is that I'll use the Intex pool for the main fish tank. Because, like I said, all I'm going to be raising is catfish. And catfish, they require a lot of water. But I think if you keep it clean, you could put more than what the average ratio that they recommend for water to catfish or fish to water, fish per gallon. As long as you keep that water clean and prevent the ammonia from building up. I've heard that catfish are territorial feeders and, they may eat each other. I don't know. I don't care. It all balance out in the end. And then I'll be using the IBC tanks for return tanks and a fish waste sump tank. Now, here's the possible problem that I might be running into with doing this, and I think I got a couple of solutions for it. Remember, this is all stream of consciousness, just off the top of my head. Here's the possible problem. Let's say I was to get one of those 16-foot wide by 4-foot deep Intex pools and lower it into the ground. Well, according to the calculations that I've made, that's approximately 6,000 gallons of water. If I was to build a 4-foot by 8-foot by 1-foot deep grow beds, that's 32 cubic feet or roughly 240 gallons. I know numbers really don't, I'll probably put some little things up here to keep the numbers straight. Well, most aquaponic experts state that you need to have a 1-to-1 ratio of gallons in your fish tanks or tank to gallons in your grow beds. Now, obviously, when you put the grow media in the grow beds, there's going to be some displacement and all that good stuff. But let's just try to keep this simple. I would have to have a 1-to-1 ratio. I would have to roughly build 25 4-foot wide, 8-foot long, 1-foot deep grow beds. Now, that's a lot of grow bed, okay? And even in a 16 by 32 foot greenhouse, I'm not going to be able to fit but maybe 8 underneath it, okay? So what are we going to do here? Because what you're going to risk then is that if you're not able to cycle out the water, you're going to possibly have a problem with ammonia buildup if you don't get the waste out of there and into the grow beds and everything else. So what I'm coming up with, and this is what I'm thinking about doing, is that have an IBC tote, one of the 275-gallon IBC totes, and have that dedicated. Obviously, it's going to be a sump, but really, really work on a system to get as much fish waste out of the water as possible. Okay. Now, there's still going to be a possibility for ammonia buildup. I'm going to have to work on that, but I think as you get all the fish waste out, that will help, especially the solids. You're going to have to get the solids out of there to prevent the ammonia buildup. Okay, so then what do you do with all that extra fish poop? Well, here's what I think can happen. One of the other things that a lot of aquaponic experts state is that just like a fine wine, aquaponic grow beds have to be built up. It's kind of like the same thing as when you build up your soil to grow in. A lot of people think, well, I got an aquaponic system, and bam, I'm going to have the best vegetables in the world right off the bat. That ain't so. You have to build up an aquaponic bed just like what you have to your regular elevated soil grow beds. So, and one of the main layers of that is obviously building up the biomass from the fish so that it can break down in the grow media, get to the roots, and make the plants grow. For example, if you have a system, like right now in my garage, I have a system that's only a couple of months old. It will not produce nearly as well, and probably not produce as well as of food as what a 2-month system, a 2-month-old system will not produce the same quality of food as what a system that's 12, 14, 18 months, 2 years, 3 years is built, because it's been built up. And I think this is one of the main reasons why a lot of people wonder about the nutritional level in aquaponic food, because it's constantly going in, coming out, all that good stuff. So what could possibly happen, and I'm not sure about this because I don't want to end up cutting my nose off to spite my face. What could possibly happen is that since you're not going to have that many grow beds, you don't want all that fish waste going into one grow bed, okay? But there's also, if you're trying to run 6,000 gallons through only, let's say, 10 grow beds, I don't think you're going to get even distribution. You're not going to get enough concentrated distribution of fish waste, or you may get over concentration. You got to be careful. So what I think can happen is that to build up the system quicker, what you could do is directly pump the excess fish waste from the sump tank into the grow beds and start building that biomass up to where it can start breaking down, getting the good biomass working up in there, and then everything else will be supplemental. Yet again, I'm just thinking of all this off the top of my head. I am not trained in this. I'm just trying to use some common sense here. Now, the other thing that could be done with the excess waste is that it could be used for lawn fertilizer, just for my basic lawn. It could be pumped into my lawn or sprayed on my lawn or what have you. Then if I still have more left over, then I could give it away because it makes good basic composting material for soil gardens, for aqua gardens, for hydro gardens, for all sorts of different types of gardens. So there'll be ways to balance the system out. There'll be ways to balance it, also build it up. Okay, and without having to risk the system not being balanced, without necessarily having to run all 6,000 gallons if I was to get a pool that size, and that's probably what I'm going to do, and I'll explain why here in a minute. Without having to run all 6,000 gallons through the system, you could at least have the system pumping the waste out, having that build up somewhere, then have that help build up the beds as you add them. And then you could do other things with it. Pump it into the soil, give it to people, for their own gardens, turn it into other, let it compost a little bit more, for like I said, dirt, for soil gardens and things like that. Now, I've gone through all that. And maybe there's so I've gone this whole long trip to get to this. Okay, I'm already, going into 15 minutes on this thing. So I'm sorry I get a little long on the tooth. I've gone through all that, and there's one thing that I've noticed about all these people who have used these Intex pools for ponds. First of all, they usually receive the wrath of a bunch of people because, you can't use that, only for a temporary solution. And there's people who have said they've used it for up to 3 years, and they're still using it to this day. So I don't buy that argument. I think There's no one way to do this. There's no one way to build a pond. And I know that I might be thinking that I'm going the cheaper route, but it might run me a little bit more expensive in the end. Well, that's a lesson learned if that's what happens. But I like putting my hands on things before I do it, and I can go down to somebody's house, see this pool, and check out the quality of it. When you're spending $200-300 a roll for pond liner, and you could basically do the same thing with a $250 swimming pool, I think there's no comparison with that. But there's never really been a step-by-step process shown on how to use one of these above ground pools, drop it into the ground, and convert it into a pond that could be used for an aquaponic system. Now, I've seen a couple of guys, they've shown their end result, but they didn't really show how they did it, which is part and parcel to the YouTube culture. They do 1-2 minute videos, and they don't explain anything. They just show, oh, okay, this is what I did, but they don't show how they did it. They don't show where they messed up. They don't show lessons learned or maybe hints or what have you. Okay? So what I plan to do, and this is a plan, what I plan to do is try to do a step-by-step series on this. Get the pool. I'm going to already have to get a mini front loader and a backhoe anyway for when I build the garden, for when I build the greenhouse, because there is no way in the world that I'm going to level off and hand dig a 16 by 32 foot greenhouse. My back is already killing me. God keeps on giving me hints outside with all the rocks that are out there. So it's worth spending a couple $100 down at the Home Depot to rent these tools that I need in order to do it. So those costs don't really figure into it because I was going to get those tools anyway for the main greenhouse. So what I plan on doing is trying to do a series on this. And I'm probably going to concentrate on this aspect of my aquaponic system a little bit more intently than before I do the greenhouse. Now, that doesn't mean that my challenge to Bobby does not stand, even though he hasn't accepted yet. But I'm probably going to concentrate on this a little bit more than what I am going to on the greenhouse, because I think I got the greenhouse design set and what I'm going to do. It's this now that I need to intensely research and see how I'm going to do this. So I plan on doing a series. I plan on pointing out where I'm going to screw up, or I'll plan on pointing out where I screwed up. Maybe I could have done this better, because like I said, nobody has really walked through how to do this. There's been a couple of YouTube videos of just pictures being shown, like I said, the final results, or they're just ponds. They're not used for an aquaponic system. So I think this is where I kind of go off into a different direction. Like I said, there's been a couple that have shown their end result, but they didn't show how they did it. And so that's not really helpful. So I hope to help people with this and not be afraid of using something like an Intex above ground pool, drop it into the ground a couple of feet. Like I said, I have to because of my wife. You may not have to, so you could probably skip that step. But in any event, that's what I plan to do. So I've gone on for roughly 20 minutes already. Hopefully I'll par this down for you so you don't get too bored. But anyway, but that's what I plan to do. That's what I see as the advantages and disadvantages of both systems, the Intex pools and the IBC totes. I'm going to try to combine the technologies, use the best from both. And that way, and also another reason why I want to go with such a big pool is because I don't want to be constrained. And I'll get into that in another video. If I get a 10-foot pool or whatever, I'm going to be constrained on what I can do. So we'll just see what happens, and I hope this is going to help, and I'll keep people informed on how the status goes. I'll probably be working on the pool part of this over the winter, as well as trying to get the preliminary stuff of the greenhouse down. But like I said, if I don't get this balanced, if I don't get this working, if I don't think this is going to work, then I'll have to reevaluate how I'm going to do the greenhouse. But this is the tack that I'm going to take at this point in time. So those are my random thoughts on this. And like I said, thank you for viewing, or like I always say, thank you for viewing. God bless you, and may God bless this great republic of ours.